In the spring of 2021, a ship ran aground in the Suez Canal. It sat there for 6 days. And in those 6 days, the global economy lost an estimated $10 billion per day. Grocery shelves in Europe went bare. Car factories in Asia idled. Fuel prices spiked across 3 continents, all because one vessel, 400 meters of steel and cargo containers, got stuck in the sand. The world was stunned. Economists called it a freak accident. Logistics analysts called it an anomaly. What almost no one called it was what it actually was, a preview. Because 2 years later, the same system broke again, not in the Suez, not from a grounded ship. This time it broke because of a war nobody expected to reach the ocean. The war in Yemen had been grinding since 2014. It had killed hundreds of thousands of people. It had collapsed a country. And for years, the shipping industry watched it from a distance, the way you watch a fire on the other side of a river. Close enough to see the smoke, far enough to feel safe. Then, in late 2023, the Houthi movement began targeting commercial vessels in the Red Sea. What happened next did not just disrupt global shipping. It revealed something the industry had spent decades pretending was not true. The Red Sea is not simply a body of water. It is a corridor. Every year, approximately 17,000 commercial vessels pass through it, carrying roughly 12% of all global trade. That includes 30% of global container traffic. Billions of dollars in goods every single day, funneled through a channel roughly 300 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, flanked on one side by the Arabian Peninsula and on the other by the Horn of Africa. The Suez Canal sits at the northern end of this corridor. The el-Mandeb Strait sits at the southern end. There are no alternatives. If you want to move cargo between Asia and Europe by sea, you go through the Red Sea, or you sail around the entire continent of Africa and add 2 to 3 weeks to your journey. The shipping industry knew this. It had always known this. What it chose not to build into its models was the possibility that someone might close the corridor. The Houthis did not close it with a navy. They did not have one. They closed it with drones and anti-ship missiles launched from Yemeni territory, targeting vessels they designated as connected to Israel or the United States. Their stated goal was political. Their actual effect was economic. By January of 2024, the world's largest container shipping companies had rerouted their fleets. Maersk, the Danish giant that carries roughly 17% of all global container cargo, suspended Red Sea transits. MSC, the world's largest container line, followed. CMA CGM, Hapag-Lloyd, Evergreen, one after another. The corridor that carried 12% of global trade had effectively been shut down by a non-state armed group operating from a country that most people could not locate on a map. Insurance rates for vessels attempting the Red Sea route increased by 300% within weeks. Some underwriters refused to write policies at all. The few ships that still attempted the passage did so with military escort requests filed and private security teams stationed on the bridge. The Cape of Good Hope route, the long way around Africa's southern tip, became the default. It added 10 to 14 days to the Asia-Europe voyage. It added 12,000 kilometers to the journey. Fuel consumption increased by approximately 30% per voyage. Freight rates, which had only recently stabilized after the pandemic-era shipping chaos, began climbing again. The industry had a phrase for what it was experiencing. Force majeure, an unforeseeable circumstance beyond any party's control. The phrase has legal significance. It allows contracts to be suspended. It allows obligations to be set aside. It is, in a specific sense, a mechanism for saying, we built a system that assumed this would not happen, and it happened, and we are not responsible for what comes next. Here is what force majeure conceals. The el-Mandeb Strait had been flagged as a choke point vulnerability in maritime security assessments for years. The Red Sea had appeared on geopolitical risk maps for years. The concentration of global trade through a small number of narrow waterways was not a secret. It was a known feature of the system, accepted because it was cheap, because routing all cargo through one corridor is more efficient than maintaining the redundancy that would protect against losing it. Efficiency and resilience are not the same thing. The shipping industry built for efficiency. It did not build for resilience. And the difference only becomes visible when something breaks. What broke in 2024 was not just a supply chain. It was a story the industry had been telling about itself for 30 years. The story goes like this. Containerization, the standardization of cargo shipping into uniform metal boxes that can be transferred between ships and trucks and trains without ever being opened, was one of the great economic achievements of the 20th century. It reduced shipping costs by 90%. It made global manufacturing possible. It allowed a factory in Guangzhou to supply a retailer in Rotterdam with a precision and speed that would have been inconceivable to the merchants of a century earlier. The global economy, as it currently exists, was built on the container ship and the infrastructure that serves it. The story is true. It is also incomplete. The efficiency of the container shipping system depends on assumptions about the environment in which it operates. It assumes open sea lanes. It assumes that the choke points through which the system routes its cargo remain passable. It assumes that the political stability required to maintain those choke points will persist indefinitely. None of those assumptions are physical laws. They are bets. And in 2024, one of them was called. There is a concept in systems engineering called a single point of failure. It refers to a component whose failure causes the entire system to fail. Engineers designing critical systems are supposed to identify single points of failure and eliminate them by adding redundancy, by creating alternative pathways, by ensuring that no one component is essential enough that losing it collapses everything around it. The Red Sea corridor is a single point of failure for global trade. So is the Strait of Malacca, through which 40% of global shipping passes between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. So is the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil supply travels. These choke points are geographical. They cannot be moved. But the degree to which the global economy depends on any one of them is a choice. It is a choice that was made repeatedly in favor of efficiency over resilience, in favor of lower costs in the short term over security in the long term. The Houthi campaign did not create this vulnerability. It revealed it. The vulnerability had been there for decades, priced into the system as an acceptable risk, an externality that would be someone else's problem when it eventually materialized. In September of 2024, the United States Navy and a coalition of allied forces were conducting active escort operations in the Red Sea. Destroyers were intercepting Houthi drones. Cruisers were tracking ballistic missiles. The most technologically advanced naval forces on the planet were deployed to protect the passage of container ships carrying consumer electronics in fast fashion. This is not an argument against that deployment. It is an observation about what the system requires in order to function. The global trading network that underpins the modern economy does not run on efficiency alone. It runs on the assumption that naval power will remain available, willing, and capable of keeping its choke points open. The moment that assumption fails, even partially, the system reveals how fragile it has always been. The ships are moving again. Rates have fluctuated. Some carriers have resumed Red Sea transits in limited numbers. The crisis, in the way that crises tend to, became routine before it was resolved. The news cycle moved on. The choke points remain. The Bab el-Mandeb is still 300 kilometers wide. The Suez is still a single lane of water connecting two seas. The concentration of global trade through a handful of narrow passages has not changed, because changing it would cost money that no single company or government is willing to spend. What changed is harder to measure. For a period of months in 2024, the gap between what the global shipping system claimed to be and what it actually was became visible. The system claimed to be a marvel of efficiency. What it revealed was a machine that runs smoothly only under conditions it cannot guarantee, dependent on political stability it cannot produce, and protected by military power it cannot pay for. The container ships are still out there, moving cargo, running routes, delivering the goods that supply the world's stores and factories and construction sites. Most of them will complete their voyages without incident. But the Bab el-Mandeb is still there too. And the next time someone decides to make a point by closing it, the system will not have a better answer than it had the time before.